Etchr Studio is an online membership for art education with over 100 contributing artists and a thriving business selling art supplies that go with their tutorials. Yen is a co-founder of Etchr who oversees strategy and operations for the business. He brings a consulting background to a creative field, and his perspective on the business of membership is something that I honestly believe every creator can benefit from. So let's dig in.
Can you tell me a little bit about how Etchr got started?
Yeah, so the company started around 2017. There's really two sides of the business. So we do art supplies, physical art supplies. That's the product side. So we actually got that going first. And then we started the content side of the business during the pandemic, which is late 2020. So with regards to your question, in terms of the actual process to convince people, we find a very high conversion ratio. It's actually quite interesting. There's some subtlety here. Do you lead a customer with content or product first, right? So back to the chicken egg, conversation we had before. Do you get them to buy our supply material first, then content, or content first, then our supply material? So that was very much a test, right? We'd have to push on both fronts. And we figured out the cross conversion rate from content to product side is actually structurally higher than from product side to content side. And that's why we thought we had our supply material, but that should naturally sit at the lower end of the funnel. But we should probably do the content first, because more people, statistically speaking, are interested in the content side first. So now we actually are actively working with art supply brands and also retailers together in that ecosystem. And, our content is very much complementary to the product side of the business that they had.
That's really interesting. I think you hit on something that I think a lot of our fitness customers would also validate, in that the content comes before the physical products they sell. So like if we have a yoga instructor who's selling their own yoga mat that they've developed, they're not going to sell that and then get people to buy the content or be a part of the content to use the mat. It's going to happen. They're going to come in for the personality and the content, and then be like, oh, and they have a yoga mat that I love. Let me go ahead and do that. So I think it's interesting that you found that to be validated with your business as well. Another thing that I noticed is your pricing is atypical for Etchr, in that you only offer an annual option. I believe you can also buy classes individually, but in terms of the subscription offerings, there's no monthly, there's no quarterly. So I'm curious, how did you land on that decision to just offer annual?
Yeah, so again, everything we do is backed up by theory, but really very thorough and rigorous testing and analyzing. So it's all data driven. So the way we think about subscription is essentially, what's the conversion rate at a particular pricing point. So, to your question, Daniel, the benefit of introducing monthly and quarterly subscription is you can introduce a lower pricing offering. Perhaps, the implication of that is perhaps higher conversion, but then the downside is people do have the window to churn, right, much quicker, because they can terminate that after a month or quarter. And typically, again, this is theory first. A lot of people, when you don't have a lot of content, you got to really think about the implication, right, of what you do. If you have, say, 100 hours of content, you probably don't want to introduce quarterly or monthly offering, because chances are a lot of people are going to churn through the content very quickly. And typically there's a ratio as well. Just because you have 100-hour content doesn't mean people will actually consume 100 hours of content. Normally the ratio is 10-20%, like Disney platform. You're only going to watch the movie you like the most. And once they kind of churn through that, say 10-20 hours, which I can typically go through arguably in a month, right? A couple hours a week. then they will terminate or cancel the subscription service. So if you have way more content, then that's a different story. So that's number one. That's mainly from the content depth point of view, right? Really depending on how much content you have, you can typically work out the wrong way. Hey, assume a normal person, a typical customer at the normal consumption rate. What's your content library's wrong way for you to think about that? So the second point is, if you were to look at the actual data of introducing quarterly, monthly, and annual subscription, you can measure the natural churn rate. So the benefit of annual subscription is you get paid upfront, right? And you try to lock them in for a year. So by definition, customer can't churn for at least 12 months. And you need to compare that versus monthly and quarterly, where they have that window to churn quicker, and then do the calculation, right? A, B, C, and really say for the same customer, which particular pricing strategy allows you to capture the highest lifetime value. So that's number two. And number three, this is where customer feedback also matter. So you can't strictly say, right, treat them as a captive. Hey, if I sell you annual subscription, we're gonna make more money out of it. It's also got to be a value proposition that actually makes sense to your customers. So you actually talk to them, hey, if we can introduce monthly subscription at $15-$30 versus annual subscription at $120. What do you prefer? And if you got product market fit and your content is generally being wanted or demanded by customer, it's actually a naturally intended outcome. They go, you know what? You got so much amazing content, right? They are much more sticky. They're actually going to prefer a hefty discount, right? But go for the annual subscription option. So that's also, to me, a good way for people to cross-check. Do you really have product market fit? Because if you go, a lot of people tell you they don't want annual subscription. I go, that's actually concerning, right? You got to dig into it. Why, right? It's not that they can't afford it now, $10, $15, $20 a month. It's probably because you don't have enough interesting content to keep them around. So they're not sticky enough yet.
But I'm curious then, what does your churn rate look like for that annual subscription? Because if you compare it against, a monthly where for, let's say, a fitness business or something where the average customer churns after the fourth month and, at that point, there's like a 40% drop off. I'm curious how that compares to what you're seeing in your business with the annual only offer.
Yeah, so far the stats been really positive. So in our industry in particular, education sort of platform portal, the typical churn rate after a year is around 70%, which sounds quite scary, right? 7 out of 10 people, cancel and leave the service after a year. But that's the typical number. So if you look at, there's actually an interesting chart showing the retention rate by industry. So unsurprisingly, I think Amazon Prime was like, the highest. They retain like 80-90% of the customer. And then you got utility and stuff, which are, I'd argue, non-discretionary. And what they do, I imagine a lot of the fitness content, some of the members on your platform, probably I would suspect fit in the similar range, right? Discretionary, leisure-related content type of model. And the retention rate normally is only 30%. And that's pretty typical. So they are right now about 40 to 50%. So they are a bit better than the industry average. But obviously, we're trying to do a lot better. So our goal is to retain at least 50% of the customer.
What's been the most effective at driving conversions to the digital membership?
So again, very interesting question. I'll probably break it down by a few steps. So I would say on the acquisition front, we tried multiple channels. We tried social media channel. That works the economic the economic side of things work, but the cost of acquisition doesn't. Like, you're probably aware of the trend, right? Before the pandemic, it was really affordable cost of acquisition on social media. Then you had that massive spike influx. Every business was moving online, which drive the CAC to a sustainable level. And we actually figured towards the tail end of the pandemic, it's at such an extreme level. You know, the amount of money we spend on acquisition at one point is on par with the lifetime value. So in layman's term, you invest $1, you get $1 back. I just go, what's the point, right? Like, to me, that's not really a smart way of, keep doing things. And that really propelled our thinking to switch to offline channel, really contrarian. When most people are going online, you naturally question, why don't we go offline? And it so happens our content. So we actually go, what's the value proposition for us, to acquire customer from large retailers? To them, they sell our supply materials. We sell content. It's almost like, hey, they sell recipe, you sell cooking materials. Isn't there a perfect marriage? So that was a theory, right? So when we begin to pitch retailers, you just clicked with them, right? They go, why not, right? It's not like you are cannibalizing our sales or anything, right? It's more like, hey, 1 + 1 greater than 2 here. So we began to really set up that in a big way. So that's number one. So now I would say 90% of the customer now being acquired offline versus online. And they spend a fraction of the cost versus what we potentially need to spend. Our cost of acquisition go down by 80-90%. Just by switching to that channel.
That's kind of amazing, the way that you've navigated such a unique approach to your business. What I am curious about is, what's something that you've tried and failed at with the membership that ultimately helped you build a stronger business?
Well, the first thing is on the product strategy. So we used to have a freemium model. If you go to our YouTube channel, so we used to have so much free content, and the thinking is very much along the line of, hey, it's like if you sell wine, you probably want people to taste the wine, right, first before they open up their wallet. That thinking was very much logical, but what we find in content business is people love to hang on to free wine because there's enough tasting on the internet. And so we had hundreds of free content on YouTube channel. By the way, I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing that. We still have free content every now and then, right? We don't really care. That's a way of us giving back to community. But you will have there would be a balance where my analogy is, if the people is already hangover from wine tasting, chances are they're not going to buy a wine. And that's what happened to us. We had so much free content in front of the paywall. Our YouTube channel was growing so quickly, and people are so sticky. There's only one problem. They do not convert to become a paying customer. So much so, the customer, the wake up moment is, I had a friend, right? She was curious to know what I was doing. She's interested in learning art. And she had a look at our YouTube channel. She actually asked me, Yan, like, what else do I get as a paying customer? They seemingly to be enough on YouTube channel already. And that was a wake up call to me. I go, no, like, we need to scale this back in a massive way. So now we actually strip 80-90% of free content on YouTube. So we just go, what we introduce instead is, if you have a conviction problem, we do 7-day free trial, right? Or satisfaction guaranteed, right? If you buy something you don't like it, we guarantee to refund you, right? But what we don't offer is, hey, you get first 20, 30 classes free, right? At that point, we can talk about conversion. that just plainly doesn't work for us, right? The logic is sound. So that's one thing we figured just wouldn't work. Number one. Another example I would say is pricing strategy. Like a lot of people, again, my advice is do not be afraid to charge people enough for good service, because you don't want to get mixed or different signal. If you undercharge people, you convert somebody. If you are doing product market fit assessment test, that's actually dangerous, because you don't know if the person convert to your content because they genuinely enjoyed it, or because they simply felt that's cheap, right? There's so many things people buy in life. They go, that's crappy, but they're cheap, so you wouldn't mind. So I go, if you're not charging people at the pricing point that's ultimately sustainable to the business, it's actually dangerous, right? You're not getting the proper feedback. It might make you feel good, we have so many customers on dollar. But I go, how many would churn if you lift that, right, to the ultimate pricing point you want to do? And the thing is, you want to find out that sooner rather than later, right? You might just slap you in the face right away, but I still want to get slapped earlier and reiterate, as opposed to go a year later, right, when you thought you have a business but you don't. So they really just just charge people enough, and everything flows. You can give them amazing service, right? Give them good customer service, and focus on amazing content, and get great artists. Because amazing artists doesn't come cheap, right? If you sell a song for $1, the type of artist you get is very different.
I love those two examples that you just shared, because those will resonate so powerfully with the people that are in our audience, the other customers that are using the Uscreen platform. There's so many of them that leverage YouTube, and so many of them that they just give away. They give and give and give so much free content. And so to hear that from you directly, I think will be really powerful. And same with the pricing strategy. I think a lot of these people undervalue themselves and are just too afraid to set that higher price, because they're like, well, what if I can't do it? So thank you for sharing that. That's really great.